Hi, and welcome to Punished for Protecting. I'm your host, Francesca Amato Banfield. Today on my show, I'm very happy to have Ruth Collins. She is a protective mother from New Hampshire. She's an advocate for women and children's rights. She's participated in many rallies in Washington, D.C. and the Civil Rights Sunday. Ruth, welcome to our show tonight, and thank you for coming. And please let me know a little bit about, or let our audience know a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Francesca, for inviting me to your show. I appreciate being invited, and it's a pleasure to speak with you. My story began with a simple divorce in 2006. I thought it was a simple divorce. Prior to that, I had been a volunteer advocate within my community. As a stay-at-home mother, I was able to take time and train and work for organizations that were there for survivors of sexual assault, domestic abuse. Eventually got into teaching a children's empowerment program in our community that we could teach child safety to kids for free, and really thought I knew a lot, or all that there was, about protecting kids, and thought I knew all that I needed to know about women's rights and protecting our rights. And I got an education going through family court that I feel that I need to share with others.
And I know that you are very savvy in, I'm going to say it wrong, coercive control and domestic violence by proxy.
Correct.
Can you inform the audience a little bit about that as well?
I would love to. Now, my backstory is I also had been trained for 40 hours to be a domestic violence hotline advocate. I did an internship and worked within a domestic violence shelter. You would have thought that somewhere along the lines I would have heard the terms coercive control or domestic abuse or domestic violence by proxy, but I hadn't heard of those terms until I was actually going through it. And in our particular case, the education I got kind of in the field, if you will, or in the trenches, I like to say, was too late, and not knowing what I know now actually hindered and hurt my case in our situation. At one time I was told by somebody, just play the game, and they told me no more, and I didn't know what that meant. And I got a little upset because I'm not a game player. I don't play games. I'm a truthful person. I'm an honest person. I'm a spiritual Christian person. I don't believe in doing anything against my moral compass. So I wasn't quite sure what to do with that piece of information, but I have since learned that coercive control is a pattern of behavior. Just like domestic abuse and domestic violence, it's a pattern of behavior. It's not a one-time or a two-time event. It's a pattern of behavior where you are being manipulated more often than not, like non-physical, so you're not going to recognize it. If someone went up to a stranger and knocked him one in the face, you know clearly it was a physical assault. You don't have to worry about discernment with that. But if you start going into the spectrum of abuse that is non-physical and non-violent, like verbal abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, it goes into that gray area that kind of falls under coercive control, where someone will act in ways and do things in a pattern of behavior that controls you and pretty much is abusive. I know the UK recently just outlawed. They have taken coercive control and domestic violence by proxy and put it in with the umbrella of domestic abuse and domestic violence, and have made that actually illegal in the UK. I would love to see that in the US at some point in time.
Me too. Vicki Gribben talks about that, the invisible patterns of abuse. So it's the same thing. And I have a hard time getting it off my tongue, coercive control, but I do know what it means, but I can't spit it out correctly.
Yeah.
So you could, you could just continue on that note with the
exactly, and with that, they kind of go hand in hand. Domestic violence by proxy, again, a term I'd never heard, and how it's been explained to me is it's a way of behavior in controlling attitudes and using the family court system in the process to gain control of your former spouse after the divorce. Many people believe that if someone is in a marriage that is not working or could be abusive, that once they're divorced, that's the end of it. There may be a little disagreement and some conflict regarding how to parent. Everybody has that. Even married, healthy couples have some disagreements on how to parent. But this is ramped up on steroids compared to what a healthy parenting situation would be. It is a purposeful and intentional way to not co-parent with the former spouse. And with that, they'll use tactics such as, forgetting to bring the child medication when they return them, refusing to help with pickup and drop off, not paying child support on time, paying child support but forgetting to sign the check. All these different tactics. Buying the kids gifts and kind of grooming them with presents and kind of, being like the Disney dad or the Disney parent with all the permissive behaviors in their household. Saying little things like, your mother is crazy, or your mother overreacts, or even starting to target the kids directly by saying to, like in my example, you're just like your mother, you're emotional just like your mother, or you're crazy just like your mother. Those types of things being said to a child often and repeatedly, the kid begins to believe it to be true. After all, this is a parent figure, someone they love dearly, and it's someone that they judge as having a better opinion and knowledge of the world than themselves. And that's that constant discrediting of both mother and maybe one of the children within the family that most resembles the mother, whether it's behavior or attitude. Like, for example, I was learning to become a very empowered woman myself and wanted to teach that for my daughter. And the more I empowered her and the more she became empowered, it became a threat to her father because he couldn't control her behavior. She could recognize something that wasn't fair, like, the brother getting the $1,500 all-terrain vehicle for play and she got nothing. And those types of behaviors where she said, am I not valued? Am I not important? I'm not getting the same gifts and I'm not being showered with the same praise. What's wrong with me? So coercive control and domestic violence by proxy is just a series and patterns of behaviors after divorce that a male may use to dominate his former partner. And with that, he'll undermine the maternal figure. So eventually, over time, and through several in and out of court processes, which are all legal, the court allows this to happen, that the mother will have less rights and less parenting time and less visitation and less decision-making power to, at one point, the father has enough edge where he'll go in for the kill. Like in my situation, in 2012, 6 years after the divorce, my former husband petitioned the court to have full parental rights, stripping me of everything. And at this point, our kids were 14 and 16. So it made no sense. If I was so unfit and I was so unimportant as a mother, why would it take him this long to figure out? And I've since learned that the courts make money from this, to pit a mother and father against each other. The mother who's protective and loving and nurturing and wants to be a part of her child's life will pay absolutely anything to remain in that child's life. They will liquidate all assets. They'll borrow from all family. They'll sell everything they own to pay for the legal fees to stay in that child's life. Where the father, who's looking to control the other parent, more often not the mom, is willing to do the same to gain that control. And his lawyer is saying, we can get you full parental rights. We'll just frame the mother as being unstable. Let's go with that one. And then you've got the lawyer, being retained by mother saying, oh, he's not going to win this case. Nobody loses. I was told nobody loses their rights as a mother. And I did.
Tell that to the Women's Coalition with thousands of mothers across the United States and globally that are losing their children, and not one of them has been proven unfit.
Not one of them. Yeah.
That's a lot. And you can't legally take a child from from a fit primary caretaker.
They did, though.
They do.
Right, right. They did, and they've got no legal proof. And actually, in hindsight, because I work in healthcare, and it amazes me that someone in the legal profession can practice medicine without a medical license. Like to claim a diagnosis, to write reports claiming diagnostic type behavior, and inferring that there's a mental health issue and refusing to prove or disprove it. That is like a healthcare professional practicing law without a legal license, a law license, without a degree. It is fraudulent. You can't go out and practice law without passing the bar, right, and getting a legal license. So how is it that people in the legal field can practice medicine and start diagnosing kids with ADD when they really have experienced trauma and they're exhibiting signs of trauma? Diagnosing children with oppositional and defiant behavior when in fact they're just disclosing the abuse that they're taught in school to disclose. And it was walking into the twilight zone, because everything I ever knew and everything I ever was taught as not only a child safety advocate and protector and educator, we taught them in our program, and they're taught at school, you have a right to tell. No one has a right to hurt you. You have a right to tell, and you keep telling until someone listens. And
just don't tell your mother. Tell anybody else. I'm just joking.
Well, they kind of don't talk, and it's kind of funny because in hindsight, it's not funny, but it's kind of funny. In hindsight, when I was teaching this program and trying to collaborate with the chief of police, and he said something along the lines of, he said, because of course we focus on the kidnapping by strangers, because that's what you heard in the news. There was a big rash of it back in like the early 2000s. A bunch of girls being taken, boys being taken from the street, and the police chief said, you know what, statistically speaking, kids are being kidnapped by family members, not strangers. So he was kind of like saying, why are we teaching this program? It makes no sense. And he wouldn't come right out and say what it was he was referring to. And I said, that makes no sense. I have no idea. And again, it's like partial truth without the explanation. And when you don't have that explanation, you just throw that information out. And now I know what he meant. That was 12 years ago. Now I know what he meant when he said the majority of kids kidnapped or taken are from a parent. And
sometimes it's a protective parent.
Sometimes it's a protective parent. I actually had a few associates that left the state with their kids in order to protect them, and they were threatened with jail time. And it's insane.
And it's actually, when you actually study the truth about our governing laws, it is not kidnapping at all. That is a conundrum. That is a disgusting lie.
Right.
Like the pit of hell, because that's how bad of a lie it is.
Right.
And there's no such thing. What did you do? A mother has a child for their entire life, and what do? Go in the bedroom and kidnap them from the bedroom of their house? It's
exactly
I've ever heard. It's just a threat. It's a retaliation. It's mostly done to outspoken advocates, but yeah.
Yes, I found that. And it's funny because once you become a little bit more savvy and in tune, you start being really mindful about verbiage. You start being really mindful about words and words used and how they're used to convey a message. And in the media, you'll see news reporters. Most recently we had an event up here where, it was being reported. I can't remember now if it was mother or father, and it really doesn't matter, but had kidnapped their child. I think actually this last case, it was a mother. And I remember watching the news and thinking, someone who doesn't know what I now know would think, what a horrible mother. They're, kidnapping the child and damaging their child psychologically, when you don't know that the viewer, the TV viewer, the person at home watching the news, doesn't know the backstory. If that mother has known for, let's make up a number, say 6 years, that child has been sexually abused by the father, and even though she's disclosed that abuse and the child is disclosing the abuse, in family court, they're trained to automatically assume that any allegations of abuse are false, which in fact, in reality, only 2% of abuse allegations are false and made up. So 98% of abuse allegations and disclosures are true, but the courts are training their professionals the opposite. They're saying 98% are fault and 2 are probably valid, and therefore let's assume all are fault, and we're going to just frame any protective mother disclosing the child as being someone who's coaching their child against their dad. That's just nuts.
And the thing is that, you know what, though? I mean, I court watch and I agree with you, but the thing is that I've seen clear-cut evidence come out of the mouth of experts, professionals, eyewitnesses, police reports, the person's in jail, the person's on mandated rehabilitation, the person's in rehab, the person's in probation, and they still say it's a lie. It's just, it's a money-making circus act, and they know better. They're not, I mean, obviously you can't be stupid if you're a judge. I guess, you know, you
shouldn't be stupid if you're able to pass that type of education and
you shouldn't be stupid if you're an attorney and you'd pass the bar. I mean, so you know better. It's like a doctor that prescribes a medication and the laundry list of sickness and illness and death is longer than what the supposed medication does to help you.
Exactly.
It's the same nonsense. It's called the mighty dollar.
Exactly. And it's right. It's twofold. It's the mighty dollar, and then people who are in those professions. If you can appreciate for a second, just to play devil's advocate, the amount of years they put into their education, the amount of years they went into their profession to build their career, if they don't start playing the game the way people that are up above them want the game played, they're threatened by losing their license. They're threatened by never having a court case that they, take on ever won again. So they are coerced in themselves having to play the game. I hear a lot of lawyers will get out of family court. They can't do it. And that's their choice. They either stay in and be, handling the dirty money, or they get out and they practice another form of law.
Right.
Because they just can't sit there with their moral compass and watch what's taking place and not speak up and whistleblow. So they'll either lose their license for being a whistleblower, or they'll move on to a different area of court. And then all that's left, if you think about it, that stay are the ones that want the money and profit over the safety and well-being of a child. That's my
the safety and well-being of society, and children, of course, are top priority. And the thing is that, it's long-lived for those of us that are suffering and our children that are suffering, but it's long-term. I mean, it's short-term overall, because it's going to implode in on our country, and it's going to implode eventually. I mean, it's just like the person that gets high. It's temporary, and then the damages come, and the damages will come, and it's going to come to those that are perpetrating these crimes, and these are crimes.
It's right.
They're actually crimes, and there's just so much, let's face it. I mean, we had a few years ago with the housing mergers. Look at the end result. So eventually it's going to implode on itself. Right. And there's going to be a lot of judges in jail. I definitely see that happening. They don't even understand that they're not God. That's the first problem. Right. They think they are, I don't know. They think he died and they just sat on his throne, and boy, are they going to be, sadly mistaken.
Right. So. Right. The Wall Street guys, they eventually imploded on themselves. I see that coming, and the whole, Catholic Church crisis that eventually imploded on itself as well. I know a church nearby where a pastor was investigated, and it was, it came forth that he had professional misconduct was all that they were willing to give him, but he had done enough damage to the church that it is not the volume of parishioners that it used to be. It used to be so big that they had 2 different times that they would schedule their services, and they still only have 1 service on Sunday because they don't have enough people attending anymore. And that was 11 years ago. That's how much damage one person, one leader, one judge, one lawyer, it's years and years. And in our case is the perfect example. I was misled and naive enough to believe that once our kids aged out of the system and we were no longer in the system, we were no longer being controlled, that we could kind of, mend the broken pieces and resume our family. But the exact opposite actually has happened. As soon as the youngest aged out, all of a sudden they opted to go no contact. I have not spoken to my son in 13, 14 months. because he has believed the lies that have been fed to him. And I haven't spoken to my daughter and didn't know even if she was well or alive, because she's gotten rid of all type of social media, any type of conversations and communications with all relatives. It was almost like she fell off the face of the earth. She just went like a ghost, disappeared.
And that's Stockholm Syndrome. That's what
Yeah, and what people don't realize, and what the courts don't realize, how the damage goes on and on and on, is there's a financial attachment. You know, when kids age out of the system, they don't all of a sudden become financially independent and can go on and take care of themselves. There's still a financial dependency on a parent, on some parent. And if there is a parent now showering them with all these gifts and convincing them that, you know, your mother must be unstable because the court took, you know, no court would take away parental rights unless there was some really serious allegations, then it builds up the fear. Or there's always the threats, you know. My daughter had fought for years trying to live with me, and that's a different part. They were with me primarily after the divorce. 4 years I was the primary caregiver. Even after divorce, I was a primary caregiver, and through a series of events in and out of court, when he stopped paying child support, I lost my home. And interesting how when he stopped paying child support, they didn't go after him for, what do you call it when you don't follow the court order?
Contempt of court, or...
Thank you. Yes, sometimes I go blank because it's such a stressful moment and such a stressful memory. But when you don't follow the court order, contempt. Yeah, he didn't pay for 3 months.
No, it's only contempt if you're innocent.
Right. And so I'm like, I lost our house. I lost our home. I had to move out, and it basically was a form of coercive control. If you put the mother in such a dire financial situation, a protective mother, if she had to choose between a homeless shelter and her children, or handing over the kids to reside with the father who's got a boatload of money and could offer them a beautiful home in what looked like a stable house, the mother is going to choose letting the kids go with the father versus putting them in a homeless shelter. And sadly, that was my mistake.
He impoverished you with his wealth.
Right. Right. So they went to live with him since I had no home. And so with that,
coward to me, but it sounds like a man that I wouldn't say man actually, but anyway, hope he's watching. Hi, go ahead. No, I mean, I guess I was raised differently. I'm raised in a family where a man would never do that. They respect women, and it shows honor and integrity in themselves, and they would never do that. As a matter of fact, previously to this show, you and I were talking about it. I know somebody right here in our neighborhood that unfortunately he did marry a woman, and she is a drug addict, and she's not healthy or safe to be around her children, and she's currently in jail, and for the right reasons.
Right.
And we're not pro woman and pro man, you know, how, but the thing is that stats are stats, and this man will not take the children away from her. Right. Okay, because he's a man of class and integrity, and he knows that sacred bond between a mother and a child that you cannot touch. You may think you can touch it, but you really genuinely cannot touch that bond. And so, yes, he's going to put the safeguards, but he's not going to do that. He would never do that. And actually, we were discussing, and maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit, about the 50-50 and the concerns that we have about that, and the, you know, because that ties into this.
Yes. I found myself when I was, you know, going through this process, and it does make you feel like you're in the twilight zone because nothing makes any sense. It's just not logic. You find yourself, you get very desperate, and it's a very emotional time, and you're not able to necessarily think really clearly because common sense is no longer working, because it's not common sense isn't the head of this train. So you tend to be very open to whatever it is that's something is better than nothing. So for example, if you're being threatened with loss of parental rights, as I was, that trial, that whole process, that was 14 months of, you know, fleecing both dad and mom. It took 14 months from the time those papers were received by me until the judge actually came with judgment. So in that time period, when you really have to entertain the idea that you could potentially lose all your rights, 50-50 sounds wonderful, doesn't it? 50-50 is better than zero. So there's a lot of verbiage used by the men's rights groups, the fathers' rights groups, the groups that believe that men are the head of the household, that when a woman divorces a man, it's her own fault. She loses everything, and everything includes her ability to see her own children.
Right.
That's the extreme of these men's groups. They're not healthy. They're not thinking about the bond, about the benefit of mom and dad. They're not really seeking 50-50 for the child's best interest. They're seeking 50-50 because in a situation where you're talking about an abusive relationship or a toxic or unhealthy counter-parenting, not co-parenting, but counter-parenting, 50-50 actually shakes out to 60-40 or 70-30 because
or 0-100
or 0-100, because you're always going to, if you're that protective mom who doesn't want to make a lot of noise and chaos, and you're trying to keep things peaceful for your kids, you end up making a lot of sacrifice, and you end up making a lot of allowances, and you end up giving up a lot of the battles. So it's not truly 50-50. Even when it was 50-50 for us, he would change the court order to what worked for him that day or that month or that year. A good example would be drop off and pick up. When he got them as residential custody, he then moved away. That was his other tactic. As soon as he had them in his home, the majority of the time, he opted to move 45 miles north to make it even less possible for the kids and I to spend time together. We all used to be in the same community, and he took them away from that, so it made it more complicated. And one of the complications he chose to use was pick up and drop off. He wanted no part of it. I would have to drive all the way up, get the kids, come all the way back down, have the kids for the weekend, drive them all the way up. And
sounds like he hates you far more than he could ever love them.
So, like our quality time was spent in the car, and it just, like to me, I thought it would have shown my son and my kids something really valuable if he was cooperative and said, you know what, I'll bring them down to you and you can drop them off to me. And we're going to share this responsibility, because I want to prove to my kids that I'm that type of father that I can reflect on. You've had a hard, busy week at work, and I've had a hard, busy week at work. But he just would do things like that to add stress.
So in your particular case, because in most of the interviews and cases that I'm privy to, largely there's domestic violence and a drug addiction and things like that the court just completely agreed. So it just was with a coercive type.
Yes, was, and that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up, Francesca, because this is the part I need to drive home to Joe and Jane taxpayer, whose taxes are paying for all of this, and that's another thing. But their taxes, our taxes, my own taxes paid for this funding that is an incentive for this to happen. But if the courts and the court of law and the guardian ad litems and the therapists and the social workers and the Department of Health and Human Services cannot take verbal, emotional, psychological abuse seriously, to the point where I've heard from many mothers that their children are cutting, they're drugging and drinking, and they're trying to attempt their suicide.
That's right.
Because the emotional pain is too much and the constant chaos is too much, that they want to escape from it. They don't want to harm themselves or others, but the only way they have out to escape all of this is to either drug out, numb, or die.
That's right.
That's how the kids, because they're not being heard. And if they can't take that seriously, then I am not surprised that they're not taking sexual abuse allegations and disclosures seriously. If they minimize, you know what I mean, lower offenses and pretend that that's not even important, they're not going to take the serious offenses, and vice versa.
Yeah, and that's part of our biggest argument, and one of the things that we're fighting so hard is the ADA violations, that people don't understand the American with Disabilities Act, and that they're actually causing disabilities on people. And in the interim of causing these disabilities, you don't have to have a disability for them to violate your ADA, and people have to learn about that. Okay, you don't have to
Right.
have it. They cause it, but you don't have to have it for
Right.
to violate your ADA. And that is a huge problem that they're not looking at, but they're not even looking at genuine, like, full force punches and domestic violence and probation and drugs. And they're not looking at that. So how can they look at the so-called, we say so-called invisible ones? They're
Right.
not so invisible. They show up and they manifest in the child hitting somebody at school.
Yes.
They show up and manifest in the child that's all of a sudden 1 minute acting good and the next minute as sitting in the corner and hiding. You know, they do, but you don't, the judge doesn't meet your child, so the judge doesn't know. And then they got the lying, manipulating guardian ad litem's and child attorneys that make up anything. And we've got recordings of these attorneys. We actually have recordings, because see, we've got a lot of victims that are actually advocates in the court. They're little eyes and ears that the court has no idea what we've got. And we've got recordings of the child attorney saying, we have to have one of you. You have to have you not like one of your parents.
Right.
They actually tell them that, and the kids are like, and then of course, if a mother comes to court and says, she said this to my child, the judge isn't going to believe that. They're going to think that she's making it up. But we have proof. We have proof of this, because here's the thing. You hear the story from one person, you might question it. 2, 10, 30, 10,000, tens of thousands now are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Just anybody get on the Women's Coalition page on Facebook. You will see I mean, take a look at those women and you can tell by a person's eyes, okay? My eyes, you can tell they're not crazed and nuts. You can tell by looking at those women, one more beautiful than the next, and one more, you can see the sanity in them, and they've been through hell. Right. They've been through hell. Okay, and they're still going, you know, so it says a lot, you know. So if you didn't crack after this, you're never going to.
Exactly.
You're never going to. You are strong and amazing. That's it.
It is.
So, and if any of these judges went through half of what we went through, they'd be sitting with their thumb in their mouth in the corner, wrapped in a straitjacket. And any of these child attorneys, which one day will have that, they will have their day.
I believe so. I believe so. I'm a firm believer that you get back what you put out in this world. Oh, yeah.
It's exposure time.
Yes, exactly. And so, you know, I feel like I can't do anything to save, it's sad to say this, but I'm going to say it out loud. I can't do anything to save my family at this present. The only thing I can do right now is just keep offering my kids, whether it's through prayer or reaching out through people that know us mutually, is just saying, I have unconditional love. I'm not judging. I'm not upset. I'm not blaming. My heart and my home is here for them when they're ready to accept me back into their lives. I know they know deep down in their soul, something is not adding up. They just don't feel safe enough to stand up to their dad yet, because it could mean being kicked out of the house, which means their college tuition will double because now it's not in-state college tuition. It would mean that their dad may never talk to them again, and they can't risk that. They love him that much. And I'm not going to deny them that love between their, I mean, I can have my own feelings. I've had my own experience, but we're talking the difference between a husband, wife, and that's different than a father-son, father-daughter. And so their relationship, despite what he's done, is going to be different. And I get that, and I respect that, and I honor it. But at the same time, I can't not speak about it, and I can't be silent about it, because we lost way too much and we can't recover it. We can't recover it. But if I can help somebody else either validate a woman's experience, or if a college age kid is online and sees this interview and says, boy, I told my mom, you know, someone told me my mom was crazy, or I was told my mom wanted nothing to do with me and she abandoned me and she didn't love me. Maybe I'll look her up. Maybe I'll go on ancestry.com, or maybe I'll start asking some questions, or maybe I'll do some research, and maybe we can connect kids who've been given this, you know, bag of goods and lies about their mother, and maybe we can start uniting some of the older kids who are now young adults with their mother that they've been estranged from, and start reconnecting. And then more stories can be told, and we can hear that this has been going on since the 1970s.
Right. It's crazy. Yeah.
They're out there. We're going to start talking. And the more they hear, then the more they're given permission to talk themselves and tell their stories and feel safe to tell their story. There's a great book I wanted to plug, Beyond the Hostage Child, Towards Empowering Protective Parents by Leora Rosen. So that can be found on Amazon. If anybody wants to know the why, a lot of good research in here.
That's awesome. Do you want to hold that up? Do you want to hold that up just one more second for the viewing audience? Beyond the Hostage Child, Toward Empowering Protective Parents, Leora and Rosen. Good.
A lot of research. So that explains a lot of the why.
And you have one more?
We have,
Okay.
I have got several books. The Motherless America, which explains the funding behind it all.
That's excellent. Yes. Motherless America by Doreen Ludwig.
If you look at people who are in this situation, mothers, more often than not, if they've been stripped of their parental rights, another benefit of men taking full rights is that they end up switching up who gets child support and who pays child support. So it went from me receiving the child support because I was the caregiver of the kids. It went to him receiving the child support. Even though he earned 2 to 3 times my income, I was now being court ordered to pay a weekly allotment that was based on an income I never earned or wasn't earning at the time, but they said—
Which is actually against the law to project
I have more violations. I could have an amazing civil suit if I wanted to pursue it. And the kids could actually get a lot of money because they've been violated.
Pursue it. Oh, pursue it. Pursue it. Pursue
We've
it.
got so many violations.
Pursue it.
Just unbelievable. And that would be one of them, is it's illegal to base child support based on income that you're not earning.
Well, unfortunately, we're getting close to being out of time, so you're going to be one of the guests that I'm going to have back on because it's been very informative. I want to say one quick thing about that. I have an issue with that too. I come from an Italian family from New York, and I don't know men that, let me tell you, they will pick up the tab at a restaurant because it would be an embarrassment and a shame for them to not pay for a woman and women at the table. It would be a complete and utter classless act. So these women that are having to pay fathers for child support, oh dear God, I'm sorry. That's just something that I don't even, it doesn't wrap around my head. But anyway, that's another topic I guess we can get into one of these days. I'm a big person on class and integrity, morals, accountability, values, and a man being a man and a woman being a woman. And I don't know, I'm not into this whole thing, but anyway, we're going to have to wrap it. I so appreciate having you here today. Did you want anybody to contact you or just through our website, or is that something that you do, or?
I actually work with someone who has a Facebook page called Brave Protective Mothers. So they're welcome to go on Facebook.
Did you want to give that?
Yeah. Brave, B-R-A-V-E.
Okay, so Brave Protective Mother.
On Facebook.
Great. They can look you up at Brave Protective Mother on Facebook. So that again is Brave Protective Mother on Facebook if you want to look up Ruth Collins. Again, I thank you so much for being here this evening. Survivor, protective mother or father, if you're an advocate, a whistleblower, a domestic violence, a sex expert, childhood endangerment, advocate of any kind, we would love to have your stories. And you can get us on the website at punished for, it's the number 4, beingaparent.com. Again, it's punished for, the number 4, beingaparent.com. Thank you and have a great evening. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye.